What if the key to breaking free from stress, anxiety, and old emotional patterns isn't just in your mind, but in your nervous system? In this episode, I'm joined by a neurosomatic intelligence practitioner, Tyler Begg, who is revolutionizing the way we heal by bridging the gap between mindset and the body. If you have ever felt stuck, overwhelmed, or like traditional self-help just isn't cutting it, this conversation will change the way you see personal growth forever. Get ready to discover how to rewire your nervous system for resilience, healing, and lasting transformation. Welcome to the Happiness on Tap podcast. I am your host, Leanne Herron, a former accountant and paralegal turned certified life and health coach. This podcast is your go-to podcast for uplifting conversations that stir the heart and ignite the spirit, where we bring you inspiring stories and practical insights for a happier, more fulfilling life. So let's get started. Today's guest is someone who is helping bridge the gap between the mind and the body in a revolutionary way. He specializes in nervous system regulation, trauma-informed coaching, and helping people rewire their emotional and unconscious patterns for lasting change. We are diving into the science-based neurosomatic healing, why mindset work alone isn't enough, and how you can start applying these principles in your own life today. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, Leanne, it is truly a gift to be able to be here and to share this information with everyone.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for this information. What you do is definitely something I'm interested in learning more about, and I'm sure my audience will be as well. So let's jump right in. So Tyler, what exactly is neurosomatic intelligence, and how does it differ from other healing modalities?
Yeah, neurosomatic intelligence is a modality that is a blend of kind of the latest trauma research and applied neurology, which is a modality that it doesn't diagnose, it's non-pathologizing, it's non-invasive, non-medical. It's often found in sports medicine for performance and also for rehabbing things like traumatic brain injury. And in the founding of neurosomatic intelligence, it was, the founder, Elizabeth Kristoff, really saw how it could have big effects and changes in the mental health field as well. So kind of how it works is it takes assessments of the body and where the body is at, using certain kind of biofeedback, range of motion, breathing mechanics, things like this, in order to find some tools, some neuro exercises that will create shifts in the nervous system. It's stimulus that the nervous system is really wanting, and that create regulation, allow it to kind of come down into a relaxation, a parasympathetic state. And by doing these exercises regularly, it repatterns the old neural pathways, because so much of the time, our operating system is kind of functioning on an old mode. And by continuing to operate on that old mode, we strengthen those pathways, just habitually stronger and stronger and stronger. And by introducing some new stimulus with these neuro tools, it asks the brain to create new ones, create new pathways that are that allow for regulation and calm and an increase in capacity without going into those old and often, self-sabotaging or painful patterns. So because these tools target the nervous system as a whole, anywhere that the tool targets, because the tools will target sometimes, just the visual system or just the sensory, sensory input on the feet or something like that. Because the nervous system is, ubiquitous throughout the whole body, a change anywhere in the system creates holistic change because it's all connected, right? We often, for ease of communication, we split mind and body, but in reality, there is no difference. They're all operating at the same time, and so a change in one place, has that ripple effect throughout the body. And some of the biggest ways that neurosomatic intelligence is unique in its approach is one, it does not require going back into the past. It does not require talking about, what's going on. It can be nice. And so in my practice, I will bring in some parts work. I will bring in some inner child work to facilitate like getting a narrative of what's going on. But if there's someone who, I've gone into my past so many times, it doesn't help. It's really uncomfortable. With these tools, it's okay, let's look at your body metric assessments, the range of motion, the breathing mechanics, these things, and let's find the tools that are right for you and then make them a daily practice. And that's all that's needed to begin. It also has, so through these assessment techniques, not only can we find out what tools are right for the specific nervous system that is in front of me, but also the dosage. So not only is every tool going to be different for every person, but also the dosage of that tool. When I say dosage, I mean, the repetition of, doing that tool or the duration that you're doing that tool, because for pretty much everything, there is a sweet spot. Too little and it's not enough. The nervous system doesn't pay attention. Too much and it's overwhelming. And when it's overwhelming, too much of a good thing, it still is a practice of going into dysregulation. And that's what we don't want with neurosomatics. We want to be strengthening the pathways that are regulatory and that restore safety and return energy into the system.
Okay. You covered a whole lot, and I took some notes on some things I would love to touch on. Just for my own healing, things that I experienced. And now that I have learned more about neurosomatics and my own nervous system, I now see why certain things helped me and certain things didn't. For me, definitely, like you said, dosage and repetition. I developed a daily meditation practice. And that really helped so that on days when I couldn't or didn't, and life got busy and I maybe didn't get back to it for a couple of days, my body, as soon as I would sit in my place and go into my meditation, my body would remember those things. And so I understand, like you said, like finding that sweet spot. For me, that was my control. I could control my breathing. I could, have gratitude that my body could hold me in place when my mind wasn't focused on my body. And just knowing that I could easily go back to that place when I needed that tool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think it's really useful to recognize that sometimes where our where our intellect is, where our thinking mind is, and how it's perceiving things is not always the same as how the nervous system is feeling it. And so the assessments that we use in neurosomatics can kind of like get that answer, right? We're not taught how to listen and understand the language that our body speaks. And so this can be a great way, the assessments themselves can be tools to restore or to learn for the first time how to speak and listen to what the body is saying. And that, it's super stressed when the mind is like, it's fine, or vice versa.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I also like that you touched on how it doesn't have to, that you have options for working with people when you do your assessment, and people who maybe come to you after years of therapy, where all they have done is spent years focusing and unpacking their past, but never learned the tools to go forward. That you have kind of that ability to help those people.
Yeah, it's really it's so there's something that can happen. Talk therapy can be incredibly beneficial, and there's something that can also happen where if there's something that is locked in the body and it's not coming out in the talk therapy, it's not getting processed. Um, Going back into the past can just strengthen the pathways that lead into dysregulation because you're only going back into something that you can't hold yet. And with the tools, the goal is to, before we get into big emotional releases, before we get into trying to form new perspectives about this old stuff, let's make sure that you have the capacity in your nervous system to be able to hold that.
Yeah, that's great. And I learned a lot of that the hard way.
A lot of people do.
So, and that's, really why I was so excited to have you on the show, was so that people can hear and learn about things that are available outside of talk therapy, or even together with talk therapy, because I'm sure you work with people who are still in therapy and are coming to you. And it's kind of the ability to work side by side and help slowly find those areas where people are ready to open those. I always call it Pandora's box, because that's kind of how it seemed for me. Like visually, I could imagine Pandora's box and lots of really ugly demons. Um, and I unpacking them all at one time, or just revisiting them over and over and over again, really for me didn't help. I needed to
Yeah.
find I needed to find things like forgiveness and letting go. And, those kind of things help me more than just talking about it over and over and over again, or writing about it, or journaling, or whatever. That to me was much more valuable working with a hypnotherapist
Hmm.
than my therapist.
Yeah. And even those things, it's like, you know, I want forgiveness. I want to find that. I want to find a way to let go. And it's one thing to say it, it's a whole nother thing to be able to do it and to find it in a way that feels authentic to you and that settles down and actually makes a shift. So 100%.
Yep, I will agree with that, because that was definitely what it was for me. Let's talk about mindset work, because, from my perspective and for a lot of people's perspective, when we get into self-help, that's kind of that number one thing that, it's your mindset. Your mindset has to be a certain place. So many people focus on mindset work when it comes to personal growth. Why is it important to integrate body work in that process?
Yeah. It's it's crucial because, I mean, the first thing I'll say on that is so much of what's happening in the mind is a response to what's happening in the body. A lot of our thoughts um, are the brain anticipating and interpreting what it means to have this sensation in the body. And the brain is a predictive organ. It really it feels safe when it has the information to accurately know that you're going to be safe in the next moment. And that information, a lot of that information comes in from the body because it's the nervous system taking in information through all of our senses. And when the survival brain, which is kind of like the hind brain, some people will probably know it as like the old brain or the lizard brain, um, its priority is in this moment, am I safe? And that takes a huge precedent over anything else that's going on if it says, no, I'm not safe. And in moments when it says, no, I'm not safe, because it feels, it receives input or it feels sensations from the body that it associates with something from the past that was dangerous, or it had threat, or it just had perceived threat, then it's going to start to increase the level of threat in the body and stress. And there's a lot of physiologic changes that happen in the body in response to stress and the perception of threat. For example, a lot of our frontal brain, our cortex, where we do our rational thought, our creative thinking, our decision making, that starts to lose fuel and go offline. And so it's not that we can't, we don't, that we're stupid or we can't do it. It's that the part of our brain that does that is offline right now because there's too much danger to be able to reason. The brain's like, I need an immediate response that I know has kept me alive in the past. In survival responses also, you can have things happen physiologically that are so extreme they make it impossible. For example, there's a muscle in the inner ear that when threat response arises, it will flex in a way um, to cut out mid-range frequencies, which is the range of human speech. And the reason it does this is because it's listening for sounds in the high range and the low range, because those are the danger sounds from way back when saber-toothed tiger was the thing that we were surviving from. We still have that, and so you want to talk with someone about a topic, something, maybe it's in a relationship, maybe it's at work, maybe wherever it is, and if it's threatening, you literally can't hear. And the conversation becomes, it falls flat. So this is why we can't kind of talk and think our way out of old patterns, because the patterns that are there to keep us alive. And so to come into the body and create safety, to remind the body and to repattern these old triggers into the present moment where they're no longer useful, right? Because it was useful in the past. Now it's not. You want an update. Using neuro tools allows for that rehab, that repatterning, so that instead of trying to force something mentally, why isn't this working? You create the sensations that allow for the whole system to drop back down where the cortex can come back online. There was something else that I wanted to say here. Yeah, another thing that happens is constriction in a lot of the horizontal structures in the body. So that can be the sort of the occiput where the skull meets the your spine, in the vocal cords, in the diaphragm, in the pelvic floor. So these are areas that will hold tension and stress, and especially like freeze response. And when that happens, it can pinch vagus nerve flow. Vagus nerve being the nerve that comes down out of the brain, and then it's the longest nerve in the body. It comes down and it basically gets into everything. It's the nerve that carries information up from the guts, from the heart, from the vocal cords, from a lot of our organs up. And when it gets physically impinged by the constriction of stress, the brain loses information. And as I said before, when the brain loses information, it can no longer predict as safely, and so the threat level rises again, and you have this sort of feedback loop. So by allowing the body to open up and relax and regain its flexibility, that's when you have the ability to do mindset work, because now you have your frontal cortex back.
Man, again, you covered a lot of really cool things. I didn't know about the ear thing, so that was really neat. Thank you for sharing that. I want to share a little story just to kind of put in perspective, from a regular person's perspective, what all that feels like. So I got out of a 20-year abusive relationship. And the last couple of times that I was with my ex was very violent. And so I kind of went into extreme hiding. I didn't want anybody to know where I lived, where I worked. And when it was time for me to open my business, I was still in trauma response and still feeling very unsafe. And so I kind of teetered between whether I wanted to work from home in my safe space or put myself out into the world in an unsafe space. It was also at the point where we were just coming out of the pandemic. And I worked in a building that had a lot of other offices and businesses inside it. So there was even like a title company. So that company had a lot of action, people coming and going all day long. And so for me, I had to find a way that I felt safe in that space going into work every day. So like I had a deadbolt on my door that helped me feel safe. I had blinds on my windows so I could keep those closed. That helped me feel safe. There was security on the premises, at least around the vicinity. That made me feel safe. But one day I had went out shopping. I was still kind of decorating my space. And as I pulled into my parking lot, my ex-husband's truck was parked in the parking lot. And I immediately, went into fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah, of course.
And so I called my husband and let him know. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going home. I'm not going into the office. I'm just going home. So the whole way home, I'm expecting that panic, that full-blown anxiety panic. And I get home and I come in my house and I lock my door and I sit on my couch and I'm still just, when is it going to come? Like I was expecting it to come. But I think because I was now in my safe space, I had used my tools, my breathing tools, to kind of bring me back into a calm state. I never hit the panic state. And so at that moment, I kind of realized how valuable the tools I was learning really were helping and made that difference. And I was able to go, you know what? I got work to do. Like, he could have been in that building for 100 reasons. It may have had absolutely nothing to do with me. So I got back in my car, drove back to my office, and his truck wasn't there. And I was able to walk back in, lock my door, close my blinds, sit down and go to work. So I wanted to share that because what you were talking about, using those tools and recognizing, am I safe? Is this real? Is this really happening? Is he chasing me with a sledgehammer through the front yard? No, he's not. Being able to have at least enough of my brain working to let me know that it wasn't a real traumatic experience. It was just that my body felt like it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's such an example of our resilience and the way in which working with the body, with the nervous system, really can give us back our agency. And it's also a great. This is a point that I think is important. One of the things about kind of speaking to the body and the nervous system is actions, right? Sensations, physical things that the body can understand. Those are the things that make a difference. Thinking about the reality doesn't help nearly as much as experiencing an action that creates safety again.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what it was for me. It was that I made my own safety by getting myself out of that situation and putting myself into my safe space where I knew I felt safe. And so, yeah, I can understand that for sure. And you talked a little bit about where, our frontal mind kind of goes offline. Um, again, that was something I didn't know anything about prior to experiencing a trauma response. I just knew that I couldn't communicate clearly. Like, I really stumbled over my words, and I had severe brain fog and memory loss, and I couldn't understand like where it went. It was just gone. And so one thing I did for myself, again, to take back that agency, was I started reading, and I don't know if you're familiar with her, you probably are, Brene Brown, the book that she did on the 87 emotions. So I used that book as a guide to help me rebuild my vocabulary in a way that I could express what my body was going through.
Incredible.
So, like,
Yeah.
reading the definition of anguish, reading the definition of, just reading them and putting it in a different context, then I was able to communicate what I was feeling when I would go to people for help, or even just to tell my husband, like, this is what I'm feeling. And I can explain it because I'm rebuilding that vocabulary.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like you're giving yourself the education on what it is that's going on in your body. So it's like you're meeting it halfway there in that communication.
Yeah, I found it very helpful to kind of slowly over time bring me back to where I felt like I had that resilience again.
Yeah. And I think this is a great opportunity to um, talk about the myriad of different ways in which our nervous system attempts to protect us, because often it doesn't look like protection. Um, So there's a whole spectrum of the frontal lobe going offline. It's not, in an extreme survival response, it it's there's very little activation. But there's also functional versions of these survival responses. And so you may have, just bits of it, like you were saying, finding the right words, brain fog. These are ways in which the nervous system tries to slow us down when it perceives threat. And these kinds of outputs from the nervous system can look like, they can look like depression and anxiety. They can look like brain fog. They can look like migraines, chronic pain. It can look like fatigue and burnout, um, and nausea, things like that. And it's the survival brain using really old tools, non-cognitive tools, to try and get you out of the threat that it perceives, to slow you down, get some rest, get out of the situation, right? And it would be so nice if it could communicate in language, but it doesn't. And so this is also the value of starting to learn about how to speak to the body, how the body itself speaks, and what it's trying to say when it does so.
Yeah, that would have been great to know before it happened. Again, that's why I'm happy to have you here, because I didn't have that knowledge. I didn't have those tools. And so, having you here to explain to how to listen to your body, because I just hit overwhelmed. I hit the wall all at one time. And it took me fighting that wall to say, okay, I need to remove myself from the situation that is keeping me in that stress response, which was my job at the time. I was literally reliving the worst trauma experience I had ever had in my lifetime over and over again, every single day that I went into work. And so
Wow.
I had the nausea, I had problems sleeping, I had anxiety, I had panic, I had depression, I had all of it at one time. But I kept fighting it because it was, this guilt that I needed to keep my job. I was making good money. I went to college for this, so I would keep going every day and just say, I just got to push through it. I'm normal. I can normally push things down. But as I explained it to my therapist, it was like I had opened Pandora's box and had released all those demons, and I didn't know how to put them back. And that's what when I basically introduced myself to my therapist, I said, I just want you to tell me how to put it back. Like, I've lived a whole life of just pushing stuff down. So I didn't want to know how to heal it. I just wanted to push it back and keep on going. But I'm glad I learned the right way to do that. Forgiveness and letting go and breathing techniques and meditation and listening to my body and all of those good things. They were so valuable. And that is what led me to what I'm doing now. Going back to school to become a certified life coach, part of that was to rebuild that vocabulary, as well as share the tools that I learned over a year of just doing nothing but focusing on my mental health. I wanted to be able to share those things with other people. And so it was kind of a combination of what I was learning, what I wanted to teach, and rebuilding vocabulary at the same time.
Yeah. Putting together your toolbox and then sharing it out with everyone. And I think one of the great things about beginning this process, especially with somatic techniques and neurosomatic techniques, is in the same way that you get kind of like the downward spiral, the feedback loops when things are rough. You start losing sleep, everything gets harder. Everything gets harder, you more stress, lose more sleep, right? But when you start to address all of these things, you can have the upward spiral, and so you suddenly you get some ease in one part of your life, in one part of your nervous system, and it makes all the others operate just that much better. And and then there's a reclamation of your own energy, not just your agency, but the energy to and capacity to actually do more things, whether it's hold your own healing process or create something in the world that you're passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah. Your approach is definitely about practical, sustainable healing. Can you share some simple exercises or techniques that listeners can try today to help regulate their nervous system?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll say about this is nervous system regulation is not new. We as humans have been doing it for thousands of years. So, two of the most powerful things for regulating your nervous system, song and dance. And the reason for this, well, a couple reasons for this is the voice, the vibration of the voice can be really beneficial to the body. It can be a regulating force for the body, in part because the vagus nerve, it activates the vocal cords. It's one of the cranial nerves that activates vocal cords, and so by using your voice, you can get stimulus to the vagus nerve and get more information coming up into the brain, and it's also practicing restoring safety to that part of us that really is so expressive. Our voice is how we share what happens in our internal world outside, so much of the time. And dance, because there's a lot of nonlinear movement. Like it's so expressive. It goes so much deeper than this. But from a neuro perspective, there's a lot of nonlinear movement that happens. And so that's really great for getting the brain hemispheres to start talking, across to one another. And it really helps with integration as well. So if dance is something that is in a person's practice, it can be a really great way after a session where you're processing emotion, you're processing some new perspectives. It's a great way to integrate it and get it to start settling down on a body level. Also, I will say you can find, because everyone's nervous system responds differently to stimulus and to tools. You can find what's right for you by starting to listen to the body and what you are listening for. Because I know that can be a really kind of amorphous, vague term if you've been disconnected from your body. If you notice all of a sudden your body takes a deep breath for apparently no reason, or you get a yawn, or you get one of those kind of like shivers that goes through your body, these are signs that some regulation has just come into the body. And so you can look like, what just happened? What did I just do? Because my body liked that stimulus. And then you can start to do whatever that is more regularly. So these are tools that can be unique to you, that you discover yourself. I will also give a few that are like just tools that I would teach, in a group. But I want it, again, with kind of the caveat that every tool is going to be different for every person. So you can try these out, but make sure you do so in a gentle way so that you're really being aware of, is this one good for me? Or does this create a little more tension? Does this unsettle me a little bit? So these would be things like sensory stimulus, like, a cloth, just kind of rubbing your feet with a cloth, or your hand, running your hands under cold or warm water, rubbing your hands together, getting stimulus, and it can be, anywhere on the body that feels good. Sensory stimulus is a really nice way to kind of to self-soothe, to kind of like ground, to come back into the body. Long exhales also. It's it's really common to have focus on our inhales, or to have inhales that are happening shallow, and in our chest, and to just extend the exhale at least twice as long as the inhale, and do that a few times. That can be really regulating as well. Giving yourself an audible exhale. That brings the voice in as well, and that the vibration of the voice. So that can be a really nice one. Compression clothing. I know people who just intuitively regulate by wearing a hat, or wearing tighter fitting clothing, or one of those sort of wide, like, back support belts around their trunk. These things also can be really comforting, really regulating. Divergence of the eyes, basically just looking off into the distance so that your eyes aren't focused in on something. That also can have a powerful effect. And because visual information is prioritized by the brain, it often that can be a really quick response. Similar as looking to one side or looking to the other. Our eyes, often we keep them, more or less just looking in front of us, especially with screens. And so to, look all the way to the left, or look all the way to the right, look all the way up, look all the way down. Again, this can be a really powerful tool. So I would advise to do it gently. The last one I'll give is the tongue is also connected to vagus nerve. And so you can move that around in your mouth really deliberately, and see, maybe make some circles around your teeth, or put your tongue, place it, on the roof of your mouth, or in a cheek, and see if you have one of those changes in your body where you notice a deep breath, you notice a shiver, you notice a yawn. Those are good signs of regulation. Or if you notice tension come into the body, or pain, that's a sign maybe this is not a good tool for you. And so those are things that you can do, and you can do them. You can do a lot of those almost anywhere. You can do them at work, you can do them in the car, you can do them at the grocery store, to help just talk to your body and say, hey, it's okay.
Man, those are all super valuable. And I only recently, and I mean recently, within the last maybe 2 months, learned about these things from an MD who her focus is called the biology of trauma. And so she's does somatic work and body work. And she covered the eyes, the looking away, way in the distance. That was really helpful. Let's see, the breathing, breathing out longer than breathing in. But I had learned that with meditation. And that's really how I taught myself to meditate, was to focus on my breath, like I was looking at it, like I could see it coming into my body, up to my mind, and then down through my body, and be able to tell it where I want it to go. Like if I was having pain in my shoulder, I could breathe into that shoulder and then breathe it out. It just pushed out, push it into the earth, let it go. That was very helpful. The touch or the heaviness, she taught like taking a pillow or a blanket and just kind of holding it over you, that weight. I know I have friends that use the weighted blankets. So those are all great things that I've recently learned, that I really found helped me out. But the yawn thing was something that I had never heard of. And she really focused on, like, that's how you tell. That's how you know it's working, is all of a sudden you'll feel this just deep yawn or a shiver, like you described it. And so that was nice. It was nice to know that I could identify what I was doing and the result. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing all of those tools. And so that people know that they can, come to you and learn them more about them and how they can work for them or what they might not. Because I did it in like a Zoom setting. And so there were that group of people that felt the release, felt their system calming down. And then there was the group of people who felt more anxious, more uncomfortable. So it was nice to be able to see that in a group and have people share how they were reacting to each of the things that she was teaching. Is this one of the things that you do teach in your groups?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I encourage anyone to, or everyone to take away, are the assessments, because with the assessments, you can apply them not just to neuro tools, you can apply them to any modality, really. Like you can bring it into your therapy session to gauge your dosage. Like, how's my nervous system responding to what we're talking about? Is it getting to be too much? Or into your somatic practices or breath work or whatever it is, like, let's actually see, how's the body responding to this. um, there's a belief often that something like meditation or like breath work, it's good for everybody. And it just isn't, because we're so different. There are some people for whom meditation is revolutionary, and there are some people for whom meditation just puts them in dysregulation, and it is not a good thing. And so when I work with people, there's just so many of these tools. And the neuro tools specifically, often they will target very specific input systems or sensory systems. And so we can really target if there's a place where there's a deficit. Sometimes threat in the body comes from a deficit in the ability to perceive information or the ability to interpret information. And so you're kind of going like, well, why is my body spinning out right now? There's no threat here. And it's because, there's, maybe it's that there's a mismatch happening in your balance system. And so we have tools that can target that specifically. Or maybe it's, there's somewhere in your ability to interpret the sensation that's slightly off, and your nervous system is like, oh, this sensation is not safe at all. When the reality is, right now you're perfectly safe. And so we can go and we can target and we can rehab that specifically. I also want to mention here that when talking to the body, using these tools for regulation, it can be very powerful, and the goal is to increase the capacity to be able to hold and process the emotions and the patterns that feed the difficulties, that are kind of the roots of the challenges that we face in our lives. But it can sometimes also be tempting to not do that and use the regulation tools to increase the lifespan of your ability to repress these emotions and tell tell the body, like, hey, chill out. I'm gonna do some regulation so that I can put this, kick this can down the road. And I think it's important to be mindful when using these kinds of tools, that we're not making it worse for our future selves by kicking this can down the road.
I can relate to that. Like I said, it was understanding the difference between putting stuff back in Pandora's box and healing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I could have just found a way, I suppose, to put things back in Pandora's box because I had done it for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Until, it just, the lock popped and that was it. So I can understand how we can put ourselves in a position where we continue to repeat the patterns that are useful to us, but are really damaging to our future self.
Yeah, we don't want to be regulating ourselves to remain in abuse or in oppression.
And I did have an experience with a lady who wanted to try meditation. And very shortly after even starting meditating, she immediately said, shut this off. Like, she felt it in her body. She knew it wasn't going to work for her. And it was nice that she was able to use that voice and tell me to stop and not just sit there and try and try and try, because that doesn't help either.
No, in fact, that actually makes it worse, because we are, in every moment, we are practicing something. And what we practice, we get better at. And so if we're practicing something that takes us into dysregulation or takes us into stress, we're only going to get better at going into dysregulation and stress. So we want to be practicing. And that's why, if you have something that is really regulating to you, don't wait for crisis. Make it a daily practice so that you're really strengthening the pathways that allow you to regulate in a way that is healthy for you. Because the stronger those pathways become, the easier it is for the survival brain to reach for those tools when it goes into crisis than the old tools that kind of like cause so much distress.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And for me, like you said, may not be for everybody, but for me, it was definitely developing a daily meditative practice. And I grew to just love it, just love that peace, love that control, love that clarity. And just for me, it gave me a sense of safety and control. And I could just be in my space and know that my body was supporting me. My breathing, all those things that are just natural to us, breath and like brushing your teeth, driving a car, those things that we've developed over time that our bodies just do for us naturally, and be able to go, wow, like I didn't fall over, or, just acknowledging what I was capable of. So that was,
I think you bring up a really important point, that is, our bodies have a lot of just innate regulating ability, but sometimes the feeling of safety itself, or the feeling of joy or pleasure, or empowerment might be the thing that is not safe in the body. And I want to just really validate that, just like processing and making and restoring safety to things like grief and anger and sadness, it can also be just as important to do that same work for the quote positive emotions, because it's so common that we learn in our early years that there are consequences for feeling joy, that the other shoe's going to drop and it's going to, the rug is going to get pulled out from under us. And so joy's not safe. Or, the places that are safe is where hurt happens. And so it can be a process to restoring the relationship to these things, even though we want them. It may be a process to get there as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I do understand where you're supposed to be safe is actually where you're not safe, where you're experiencing pain, where you're experiencing abuse or whatever. It's hard to break apart that I'm supposed to be safe. This person is supposed to provide me safety, and yet I don't have any safety whatsoever. And so you're always waiting. And, that becomes people pleasing, shutting down. For me, it became be seen and not heard. Do anything I could to not provoke situations. And so I really didn't have that ability to see joy or feel the positive emotions. And so, now that I'm in a safe space and a healthy relationship, I get to experience joy and happiness and just experience it.
Yeah. Yeah. What a revolutionary experience it is to be able to hold that without consequence.
Yeah. So you covered a lot of things in kind of things I was going to ask in different questions. Do you believe that everybody has the ability to be their own healer? And what does that mean to you? And how can somebody start taking ownership of their own healing journey?
Yeah, great question. Yes, I absolutely believe that, we have, just by being a human in a human body, we have the ability in our nature to heal, just as under the right circumstances, we can heal physical injuries. Under the right circumstances, we can heal mental and emotional wounds as well. And but a lot of it is in the right circumstances. So and that can be external circumstances. It can also be internal. So the first thing that I would say is remember that it's okay to be gentle with yourself. That it's okay to be tender, and it's okay to go at a pace that is within your capacity. One of the things that I say a lot when I'm giving someone some new tools or some kind of homework is, let's find a dosage for doing this for you that is laughably easy. I don't want you to say, yeah, I think I could do that. I want you to go, yeah, of course I can do that. That's super easy. And so often we get the messaging that we need to be pushing, we need to be really finding our edge and pushing past our edge. And I think that just it puts us in the practice of losing our own trust and losing our internal safety. So that would be the first thing, is slow down and trust the pace, and trust that your body, your nervous system is going to move at a pace that is not going to overwhelm you. We've been taught not to trust and not to listen to our intuition and our bodies a lot of the time. And so finding education on, whether it's tuning into your body and doing it really organically, or whether it's going out and finding books or teachers or therapists or podcasts or whatever that's gonna give you information on what to look for to speak with the body, and really own again that you are the expert on your own subjective experience. And that your boundaries are there for a reason. Trust those as well. That's been a difficult one. For myself, I want to take care of people, and so it's really easy for me to overextend myself. But as I listen, and notice, like, oh, I think I'm overstepping a boundary that maybe I didn't even know I had here. And kind of like starting to be a little more selfish about it, right? Selfishness has such a negative connotation, but the more that we can honor our own boundaries, the more energy we have to give back. And make sure that that what you're engaging with is right for you, and not something that should work because it works for other people.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I want to touch on two that really meant a lot to me. One is education, because that is how I regained my agency. Was I threw myself into podcasts, into books, into obtaining as much information that then I could figure out what might work for me and what might not work for me. So that was very helpful, but just having knowledge, just being educated in what's out there really helped me have agency. And boundaries, man, I don't think I even learned about boundaries until maybe a year and a half ago, that I could have them, that I was allowed to have them, that I was allowed to say no, or to be able to say, thank you for the invitation, but I am unable to attend. Instead of, I'm sorry, or starting, that answer on a negative foot to where you're already feeling guilty about saying no. And also, I didn't learn about like having a full cup. I learned about giving until I had 1 or 2 grounds at the bottom of that cup. Nobody ever told me that I should take time to refill that cup, and that if I was operating on a full cup, that I was my best self going forward for other people as well as for myself. So those were 2 hugely valuable tools that I should have learned much sooner in life, but it wasn't part of what was handed down to me as my thoughts, my beliefs, and my identity.
Yeah.
Like everything I operated on for the first 45 years of my life was given to me from somebody else. And it wasn't until my kids were grown and gone, I was divorced from an abusive relationship, and I was living alone for the first time, literally in my life, that I had to take the time to figure out who I was. Do I even like this stuff? You know, this house full of stuff that I had. Did I even like it? Or was it just things? Did I like doing these events, going to these places, hanging out with these people? Or were they just part of what I did as a husband and wife couple, or what I did as a parent in groups where I took my kids? So all of a sudden, it was just me. And I was able to learn that it was okay to have boundaries, and learn that it was okay to say no without guilt, and give myself permission to heal and to take time for myself. So thank you for bringing those things up, because they are so valuable.
Yeah, and that is a huge journey. So thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I think something that, with the boundaries and the full cup, I think there's, they're really the same coin, right? Because boundaries are not just no, they're also, I need this to survive and to thrive. And there's an amazing quote by a somatic healer and social justice worker by the name Prentice Hemphill that says, boundaries are the distance at which I can love both you and me.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
And to engage in boundaries, right? It can be really scary, especially, at the outset. They like, am I allowed to even have these, and are they safe? But when you can have boundaries with someone else, and you're in a place where you can respect theirs as well, it creates a level of safety between you that allows you to drop down in an even deeper to a deeper level, where there becomes a safety to share parts of yourself and to receive parts of someone else that otherwise would be unavailable if there were no boundaries.
Absolutely. And I learned that going into my relationship with my husband, um, because I came in with so many walls and the inability to give and receive. It was always give, give, give. I didn't know how to receive. I didn't know how to communicate what I was feeling. I didn't know how to communicate my wants, my needs, my desires, because those things had never been important to anybody else in my past.
Right.
So I just didn't think they mattered, even for myself. And so having a partner who opened up all of those things helped me be vulnerable, helped me work through giving and receiving, and being able to receive that he wanted to know my wants, my needs, my desires, my fears, my joys, what I want to do with my life. Just having somebody be there for me to teach me how to do that was magic for me, because I just didn't know how to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah. And yeah, um, it's really courageous to enter again into relationship, I think, after the wounds that we all receive, but it's also so healing. Like, we get wounded in relationship, and so that is where we heal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I want one more question, and then we'll try to close it up because I know I've already kept you past our past our time. How does your work really complement traditional therapy and your coaching? Like, how do you see it all kind of fitting together in the mental health space for people?
So neurosomatics can be very complementary to lots of modalities. It fits really nicely as a bridge between talk therapy and somatics. For the talk therapy side, especially if you or a client is hitting a wall, and you're not getting anywhere, having even as little as like a session or two to gain some neurosomatic tools and assessments to then bring into a daily practice and into the therapy session itself can be can allow that dam to break and for something new to flow. And talking about somatics, one of the risks that can be present with somatics is because movement and attention to the sensations of the body can tie really quickly and directly into old emotional content. Sometimes the nervous system's not ready for the big release yet, but the technique allows you to access it anyway. And what can happen is there can be a backlash afterwards, where you have, a big cathartic release. There's a lot of emotions. Maybe you're even held really well, like it's a great container. And then you go home and it's like, oh my God, why am I experiencing all of these old coping mechanisms coming up again? And it's because the nervous system wasn't quite ready to hold that big release yet. And so what neurosomatic work can do is get those tools in place as a daily practice to expand the capacity to a point where it's ready to hold that. And something that I see happen is when the nervous system begins to expand, it begins to build that kind of like safe foundation. The work comes up organically. It's, because, as I mentioned, there's the natural healing abilities of our, mind-body system. And so when we're resourced, then it's a natural process to start engaging with the, the roots of our challenges and our struggles. And when we have the capacity, it also is not nearly as threatening. And so whether it's somatics or therapy or alternatives even, I see this also because it's really gaining a lot of momentum in psychedelic assisted therapies as well. It's really easy to dig things up that you're not ready for. And so this gives tools to then also regulate afterwards. Like even if, because it's going to happen, even if you tap into something that's really tender and sensitive, now you have tools to make it okay. Just like your story with your ex's truck in the parking lot, and you go back with tools and you're waiting for the panic and it doesn't come. We can have a triggering moment, and then with the tools, it doesn't have to be the same as it has been in the past.
Yeah. Even just learning how to identify my triggers was really helpful. And it wasn't just, like seeing his truck sitting there, but other triggers in my body. Just being able to identify, okay, I know what that is, or I know where that's coming from, was really helpful. What is, and this will be the last question, if you could leave our listeners with one key takeaway about neurosomatic healing and personal growth, what would that be?
I think it would be that no nervous system exists in a vacuum. We are constantly in co-regulation with one another, whether we know it or not. Like whether it's our partner or it's the random stranger sitting at a table in the library over there or crossing the street. We are co-regulating with them. And so we are never alone in this. And to engage in work that allows us to gain safety in ourselves, the way that we co-regulate others has a ripple effect, and that is tending to yourself in this way is an act of communal healing as well.
I like that. I like that. This has been such an amazing, eye-opening conversation. I know that my listeners are going to take away a lot of this information, and I hope that they do. And I love how your approach brings together the best of science, self-awareness, and empowerment. Where can how can our listeners contact you to learn more about your work?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on my website, tylerbegg.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, but the website is primarily, where I get messages and where I see clients through, where there's some education I offer. A free 45-minute consult if this piques your interest and you want to know more.
And I wanted to mention too, you mentioned to me in separate conversations, the big majority of your work is all virtual, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I see people all over the country, even outside of the country. So I really like to be as available and accessible as possible. I also offer a sliding scale with that work as well, because I think it's so important to get this out there.
I agree. I'm with you there. That's what I kind of helped me come into the reality of closing my business from being an in-person service to being a virtual service, and the abilities to help people and meet them where they are. So that was great. I will include your contact information in the show notes for everybody. So your website, your LinkedIn information will be there. I want to thank you again. And to all of our listeners, please remember that healing is not about fixing yourself. It's about reconnecting with yourself. Keep prioritizing your well-being, and we'll see you next time on the Happiness on Tap podcast. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you so much.